We started this series on Japan talking about how they're the most Western, Eastern state. And in really any measure of society, economics, technology, culture, they are very Western. They look like the United States or Western European countries. And how did that get to be that way, given what we just talked about during the Japanese imperial aggressive phase and bad blood, where they pissed off everybody in the U.S. and Western Europe and the Asian neighborhood. And by the end of World War II, they're in ruin, utterly destroyed and incapacitated. 2 atomic bombs dropped on them. How can we say that they got to the point of being as rich as the United States and the richest countries on earth? Great question. All of this happens in the post-war miracle phase after the conclusion of World War II. It's really the formation of the modern state of Japan, part 2. I mean, really, they industrialized and advanced their technology and everything during that Meiji Restoration. And they had the bad war period, and now they're going to rebuild into what you now know as Japan in today's world. And here's how it happened. They were completely and utterly destroyed in 1945. Not a bridge, building, or industry standing. And you can really kind of look upon this as a blank slate that they're going to get to rewrite once again their history and future onto. Now, not only are they completely destroyed, but they are, for the first time ever, occupied by a foreign power. And that's pretty humiliating, embarrassing to the Japanese as well. Who's the foreign power? Well, that would be Uncle Sam, of course. Under the leadership of General Douglas MacArthur, who actually led the entire Pacific War effort during World War II. MacArthur comes in and formally accepts the full Japanese surrender, full surrender, and really from 1945 to 1951 is in control of the state of Japan. Yes, they still have the emperor. MacArthur allows the emperor status to be kept, but it's just a figurehead. But really the entire government's wiped out. Okay, those are the guys that conducted the war. They're all gone, fired, some of them convicted of war crimes and killed. And what MacArthur's then going to do is oversee a complete redo of the society. And again, keep thinking back to that Meiji Restoration. This is a very familiar story. During lead up to the Meiji, the Japanese are behind. They can either embrace the West or fight against the West. And you really have the same thing here post-World War II. They just fought this big war, and they could continue to try to push out the foreign devil dog U.S. who's there, and they can try to rebuild and fight again, or they can embrace the West. And just like during the Meiji, they choose the embrace. So they embrace the United States tutelage. And under MacArthur, he oversees them redoing their economy, restructuring their military, even redoing their banking systems and educational systems, all under American tutelage. And the first thing they kind of do is say, okay, you guys need to redo a constitution too. You can't have that old crap, that militaristic stuff you guys just lived through. Here's our constitution in America. It's awesome. Check it out, copy at will, and make your own. And the Japanese did. With one important contingent that I do want to point out. The Japanese in their constitution decided to ban themselves from having a military. What are you doing? What? No military? What are you talking about? They don't. They have a Japanese self-defense force. Well, what the heck's that? Well, it's something that looks like a military. It smells like a military. It behaves like a military. It's got ships like a military, weapons like a military, arms and missiles like a military, but it's not a military. It is a self-defense force. It's more like the U.S. National Guard. The Japanese self-defense force, it would be there for times of emergency in the state, earthquakes or natural disasters, but also it's mostly there to defend. Again, self-defense force. So it has a state-of-the-art, awesome thing that looks like a military, but it's a self-defense force. It's actually never been engaged in an active battle since its creation. Except you have seen the Japanese self-defense force in action in every Godzilla movie you've ever seen. You ever notice there's tanks and stuff moving around shooting at Godzilla? Yeah, that's the Japanese self-defense force, and look how successful they were at defending from Godzilla. Not much. However, the reason I bring this up is that it's a very important aspect to understand that Japan puts itself in a very unique position adopting this stance on their military. By the way, MacArthur and everybody else did not want this. They said, no, don't do that. We're going to help you restructure your military, but don't take away your offensive capabilities. Why would MacArthur and the U.S. suggest that? I mean, they just had to fight a war against the Japanese military. Why wouldn't they want it destroyed outright? Because this puts Japan in a dependency mode of the United States. Japan really is under the U.S. military umbrella. It was then, it still is to this day. Meaning, because they don't have an offensive capability, it's a self-defense force, Japan can't help out the United States, it can't go invade anybody else, it really can't do much, and it hasn't done much. So the U.S. kind of has to be there to continue to save the day if any aggression really were to happen against Japan. The U.S. has tens of thousands of troops already in Okinawa and lots of other bases across Japan. And it's under this understanding that yes, they have this pseudo-military, but it can't really do anything. So we have to continue to protect you. Now, here's why it's important for Japan. It's actually awesome for Japan. Because in the decades following World War II, this kind of frees them up to not have to worry about national defense. They don't have to worry about repercussions from Korea or China for all their wartime atrocities. They don't have to worry about being invaded by the Russians or anybody else. They have the United States there protecting them. And this means they can spend all of their time and all of their effort getting richer, redoing their economy, working on their infrastructure, refocusing and retooling all their industry and everything else, and they do. And they do it to become the economic powerhouse we know today. So for the first 20, 30 years, they don't even have to worry about a military. That's actually a very big deal, because the military costs a lot of money to upgrade and keep up. And they ain't got to worry about it. They can invest all their money in infrastructure, economy, industry, and everything else. It's great for the Japanese. Now, what industries are they redoing and retooling and making better? You know the answer to this already. They focus all of their efforts from 1960s up to the 1980s in consumer electronics and the auto industry. And some other things as well, information technologies, and I'm sure there's a host of other things, but those are the two things that really kablamo, make them big bucks. And again, you take this for granted in today's world. Wow, of course. Japan's got the most awesome cars, Toyota and Honda and Mazda and Kawasaki and everything else. Oh, and they make the best consumer electronics and DVD players and phones and Nintendos and Wiis. Of course, that all started in the 60s and 80s under American protection, under American tutelage, and with the help of American resources. The United States invested millions and millions of dollars into the Japanese economy to help them become this economic juggernaut. Does that make sense? And just like the Meiji Restoration, Japan, again, it's just like part two Meiji. Japan looks around the world and says, okay, well, we focused on military stuff, and we're not going to do that anymore. In fact, we don't even have a military, not an offensive one. So what are we going to do to make money? Because we've lost all of our colonies, we've lost all of our resources in Korea and China and Indonesia, so we're going to have to import energy and steel and all this stuff. How are we going to make our money back if we have to buy all our stuff? What does the world need right now? What are some high-ticket items? What is it that we can buy all our resources, bring them here, process them, and make really expensive stuff so that we are in the plus when we sell it out to the rest of the world? And that's where they came up with electronics and the auto industry. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, don't they do a fantabulous job on both of those things. And they've made billions, if not trillions. And this, again, was with the help of the United States, who invested millions. It's also a very concerted effort with the Japanese government, tying into Japanese industry. And they've long been accused of almost being semi-socialist, semi-communist, because the Japanese government, for its part, during the early decades after World War II, and even up to this day, plays a very heavy hand in industry, something that does not happen in the U.S. and other capitalist states, where they would really help develop that auto industry. They really helped Toyota and Honda, and really helped out Nintendo in its inception years of their businesses to make sure they would work. And this kind of industry-government combo, again, with the U.S. blanket umbrella protection, really just made it blossom and explode. That's why they're so rich. They just do great products. They take the technologies from around the world, just like Meiji, bring them back home, figure out how to do it better, bigger, faster, cheaper. And they've done it exceptionally well. They're now the model for other Asian states. Now, we might want to back it up and end on this. Why did the U.S. do all this? The U.S. is protecting Japan and did since the war. The U.S. invested millions, if not billions, into Japan. Why? Why would the U.S. have done this to a country that attacked them? To a country that committed all these wartime atrocities that we despised and hated? Good question. Here are the answers. First, the U.S. is going to rebuild Japan, much like the U.S. helped rebuild Western Europe under the Marshall Plan. Under the idea that you're going to want to rebuild these places so that they become valuable allies and partners and trading partners. And that brings up kind of the second point. Why would you want Western Europe and Japan as rich, successful economies and trading partners? Well, there's money, but most importantly, number two is they're on your team during the Cold War. That's right, so they won't be commies. Just like the U.S.'s investment in Western Europe to save them from communist aggression, the U.S. saw Japan in the same light. They said, hey, we have to rebuild the society that we've destroyed so that communist Russia won't come take it over. Or then communist China, which just turned commie in 1949, so they won't come take over Japan. And of course, you heard the Bad Blood episode. You know that it was a very real possibility that China, in retribution, would come take over Japan for all of its wartime atrocities. So the U.S. wanted a strong, vibrant, rich Japan, so they would be a source of trade. Japan's going to buy a bunch of stuff from the U.S., and the U.S. is going to buy a bunch of stuff from Japan. That is the fact still today. We're huge trading partners. And they're on our side, a strong political ally during the Cold War, and they are still to this day, of course. See the post-war miracle unfold under U.S. help, U.S. tutelage, U.S. dollars. Japan becomes the second largest economy on planet Earth, mostly due to focusing on consumer electronics and the auto industry, and becomes a very strong, powerful Asian ally to the United States, a situation which exists